Hey everybody, so this is my 2007 Toyota Tacoma, and today I will show you how to install the K&N Performance Air Intake. So this intake is for the 2005 to 2011 Tacoma V6, and K&N actually offers two different versions. This one right here has a stainless steel polished tube, and then a little bit lower cost version has a black composite tube. So depending on what look you're going for under your hood and depending on your budget, K&N does offer two very good options. So this whole video we will be following K&N's instructions that are provided with the intake, and then it comes with all the parts you need. So the first step, you want to go ahead and disconnect the negative side of your battery, that way your engine can reset. And then there are two bolts holding the engine cover on, which are 10mm. You want to go ahead and take those bolts off and then remove your engine cover. So now the next step is to get the stock tube off. So for this metal band you use a 10mm socket, and then there are two screws holding this portion in, and those are 12mm. So we went ahead and got those all off, and now all you got to do is remove the pipe. Just kind of got to wiggle it off of the car. Alright, and that just comes right out of there. So the next step, we need to unplug the mass airflow sensor and then remove this clip down here and remove this clip right there. So to remove these clips, you're just using a combination of two flat heads to kind of pop them out, and you can see it just pops out. So the next step is to remove the crankcase vent hose, and then there's another hose, I believe it's this one right there. You got to take that one off as well. And now that we have the crankcase vent hose and the other hose back there off, the next step is to remove this next clamp on the throttle body, which that should be another 10mm bolt. Then we have a bolt right on the top of this intake part, and then another one right back in here. And then that should remove that entire stock airbox, which is this whole piece right here. So now that we have those two bolts off, along with loosened up the clamp, it's time to just take off this whole section. So you kind of just got to twist it and just kind of pull it off. Alright, as simple as that. So now we can see the whole intake manifold and the top of the engine, and then the throttle body. Now here's the stock intake. It definitely has a lot of restrictions in it, I think. Starting off with the first portion of it, you have this whole tube, and then going into the factory airbox, and we actually do have the K&N drop-in air filter, and then it actually has some other type of filter inside of it. Right, whereas the new system, it has this huge cone air filter, a lot of surface area on that, so absolutely no restrictions. And then all it is a simple about 3-inch diameter pipe right to the throttle body. So the new system is definitely no restrictions compared to the stock one. So the first step in installing the K&N intake is to assemble the heat shield, and it tells you which mounting brackets go where. So we have these longer ones right here, and they just go on the inside, and then just use one of the bolts with a washer and then a nut on the other side, and then in the center using the smaller piece along with this thick washer, and that's going to be assembled for there. And then we're going ahead and putting the other one on right there. And you don't want to tighten these up all the way until it's actually installed in the vehicle, and then once it's installed we're actually going to be taking this nut right there off, and that nut will be reused to secure the heat shield inside the vehicle. So the next step, now that we have all the brackets installed, is to use the provided edge trim to basically make the seal around the whole heat shield. Alright, so now that this whole trim is on, just go back and make sure everything's in. Now we're just going to cut off the excess. So now that we've finished putting edge trim on the heat shield, it's time to install it. We already went ahead and removed that nut, and that's sitting up there. So we're using two of the provider hardware. These bolts right here, which are 14mm, and then the 12mm one goes over there. So that one, just going to bolt in back in the original stud. And then we'll be using these new hardware to connect that one right there. and then the one down there. So right now he's just snugging up all the other bolts on the heat shield. And now the next step, we need to remove the mass airflow sensor from the OEM box, and that's just 2 Phillips head screws. And then we're going to go ahead and put this smaller silicone coupler onto the throttle body using one of the provided clamps. So now we got the smaller coupler, and we're just going to put that right on the throttle body. And then we have one of the bands around it. And we'll go ahead and tighten that up a little bit, but not too tight yet. And then now, we're going to go ahead and put the mass airflow sensor, which I just took off of the OEM system. And that's going to go right into the new K&N tube. Just going to fit right in there. And we'll just go ahead and tighten that up with the provided screws. So now we got the mass airflow sensor on, and now we are working on taking this one screw out of the top of the stock intake. And that screw is going to be put in place right there, and that's one of the 2 screws that hold the engine cover on. So now the next step, we use this mounting bracket along with the screw, and we just got a lock washer and a normal washer. And this bracket is going to be bolted on the underside of the intake, and that's basically going to support the whole tube. And the other side of this bracket will be bolted onto the engine right there. Now to install the tube, it's all ready. And one thing we did on the tube, we added 2 washers in between that bracket actually, just to give it a little extra height. So now to install it, just want to slide it in the airbox first, and then go ahead and put it in the coupler. And then now we're going to use the other hardware and mount it right there. So we went ahead and snugged up all those bolts along with the other clamp right there. So now I just removed this pipe from right there, and this one right here will be replaced with the one provided by K&N, and then this longer one is going to go from right there onto the intake tube right there. Now that we have that hose back on, it's now time to assemble the air filter. We have this piece right here, and then this coupler right here. The larger end of the coupler is going to go onto this piece, and then this piece will be going onto the pipe, and then this plastic one will be inside of the air filter. So we're going to go ahead and assemble that, and then we'll be installing the air filter. So now the last few steps, we're going to go ahead and plug in the mass airflow sensor, and then the crankcase vent hose will be put on right there. And then now we're going to go ahead and install the air filter. Just going to drop it in the heat shield and let the one side of the coupler just come through this one side. And we'll go ahead and tighten that in. And then after that's all installed, everything's back plugged in, we're going to go ahead and put the engine cover on, back on this new stud here and the original one right there, and then we'll show you what it looks like. Now the last step is to reinstall the engine cover. So then once you have that on, you're ready to reconnect your battery and then start the car up. And just the first few miles of driving, you just want to, don't floor it or anything, just kind of drive normal to let the engine reset. But then, once you do a little driving, you're good to go, and you now have a brand new K&N Performance air intake. And please be sure to check out the description of this video, because we will have a detailed sound comparison video, how this one sounds versus the stock one. And please be sure to check out my channel and subscribe.